The dust was still hanging in the air when the Mustang crashed through the fence again, splintering wood like it meant nothing. Men shouted, ropes snapped, and boots skidded in the dirt as the animal spun in a storm of muscle and fury. Another rancher went down. Another attempt failed, and while the men nursed bruises and broken pride, nobody noticed the quiet figure standing at the edge of the field, a girl who didn't flinch, didn't shout, didn't even blink. She just watched. And in the next minutes, everyone there would witness something so unexpected, so impossible, that the entire region would talk about it for years. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our stories. And tell me, where are you watching from? I want to know how far these stories are reaching. The sun beat hard on the open range, turning the New Mexico plains into a shimmering sheet of gold. Dry heat rippled upward from the earth, carrying with it the familiar scent of sun-baked soil and sweat, the kind of day where nothing moved without reason, except him, the Mustang. Every ranch in the county knew his silhouette by now, tall, lean, dark chestnut coat flashing under the sun, mane whipping wild against the wind. He had the kind of presence that made even seasoned cowboys feel something between respect and intimidation. And today, as he charged in a tight arc through the corral, that presence was on full display. Miguel Miggs Herrera spat in the dirt and adjusted his hat, eyes narrowed. "Damn animals getting smarter," he muttered. "Didn't even give us 10 seconds this time." Beside him, older ranch hands nodded in tired agreement. Ropes lay limp in their hands, boots covered in dust, and pride dragging even lower. The Mustang had escaped 3 times this week alone. 2 men had sprained wrists. 1 had a cracked rib, and nobody, absolutely nobody, had gotten close to putting a saddle on him. "He ain't just wild," said one of the younger ranchers. "He's angry." But that wasn't quite right. The horse wasn't angry. He was calculating, observing, acting with purpose, and that made him even harder to predict. Miggs wiped sweat from his neck. "We need another plan, another angle, something." That's when someone noticed her. A girl, slender, about 17, boots dusty, hair tied into a loose braid that looked like she'd done it in a hurry. She stood perfectly still at the fence line, hands resting lightly on the wood, gaze steady on the Mustang, as if she were watching a quiet river instead of a dangerous animal with a history of knocking grown men flat. Miggs frowned. "Who's that? Someone's kid?" "Don't know," one of the ranchers replied, "but she's been standing there a while." The girl didn't look nervous, didn't look impressed either. She just breathed, slow and calm, as though the chaos in front of her didn't belong to the same world she stood in. The Mustang felt her presence too, and he stopped. Not fully, not with peace, but something in his body language changed. The men saw it immediately, the way his ears shifted, the way his eyes locked on her, the tiny pause in his steps, as if he were assessing a new variable he couldn't categorize. The girl slid her hand over the fence rail. She didn't climb, she didn't call out, she didn't even extend her arm toward him. She simply let her presence fill the space between them, steady as a heartbeat. Miggs exchanged looks with the others. Should we stop her? But no one moved. Something in the moment felt delicate, like interfering might break whatever invisible thread was forming between girl and horse. She stepped over the fence. Her boots touched the dust inside the corral without sound. The Mustang tensed, muscles rippling under his coat, hooves digging small trenches into the dirt. He was ready to bolt, or charge, or both. No one could tell, but she kept walking, slow, deliberate, as if each step had weight and meaning. 20 feet away, 15, 10. Miggs felt his stomach twist. "Girl, you need to back up," he whispered under his breath, even though she couldn't hear him. She didn't. At 8 feet, the Mustang snorted sharply, tossing his head. Dust sprayed upward. The men flinched, expecting the girl to run or freeze or scream. Instead, she stopped, planted her heels gently, and exhaled. A long, steady, unbroken breath, the kind horses recognize, the kind that signals calm, not threat. And for a moment so brief that only the closest ranchers noticed it, the Mustang mirrored her. Not fully, just the slightest lowering of his head, a tiny ease in his shoulders. Then, the incredible happened. He took a step toward her. Miggs' jaw dropped. "Impossible," he whispered. The girl didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She just waited, letting the animal choose the distance, letting him decide if trust was something he could give someone from the species that had chased him for years. He stepped again. Now her voice came, soft, low, almost like she was talking to the wind rather than the horse. "You've been running a long time, haven't you?" she murmured. The Mustang's ears flicked toward her. "You're tired," she said gently. "You're not angry, you're scared. No theatrics, no tricks, just understanding, the kind that came from someone who knew what fear felt like, what exhaustion felt like, someone who had lived enough, even at 17, to recognize the language of tension." Another step, 4 feet now, close enough that she could hear his breathing. The men didn't dare interrupt. And then, with a hesitant, cautious stretch, the Mustang lowered his muzzle toward her open hand, not touching, not claiming trust. Just acknowledging that something in her presence was different, the girl let him choose the pace. Minutes passed like fragile glass. Finally, she whispered, "It's okay." The Mustang let his forehead brush her palm. Gasps broke out behind the fence. Miggs nearly lost his hat, and for the first time since this horse had appeared on the plains, someone had reached him, not with force, but with understanding. What nobody there knew, what nobody could have known, was that this moment would unravel secrets buried far deeper than the dust of that ranch. Secrets in the Mustang's past, secrets in the girl's life, secrets that would bind them and break others before this story was over. Because taming a wild horse was one thing, understanding why he was wild, that was the part that would change everything. When the Mustang touched her hand, the entire ranch froze. But no one was more shocked than the girl herself. What everyone there would soon learn is that this moment wasn't luck, wasn't magic, wasn't a miracle. It came from a past she rarely spoke about, a loss she carried quietly, and a truth that would shake the ranch harder than any stampede, because the girl who calmed the wild horse was fighting a storm of her own, one that no one else could see. The dust settled slowly over the corral, drifting between the girl and the Mustang like a thin curtain of gold. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The animal kept his head lowered, nostrils flaring gently against her palm, as though memorizing her scent. The girl stood still, eyes steady, shoulders relaxed, breathing in sync with him, a rhythm soft enough to calm even the most unsettled spirit. Only after nearly a minute did she finally draw her hand back, slow and respectful, giving him space. The Mustang didn't flee. He simply lifted his head, watching her the way an intelligent creature watches something that doesn't fit expectations. From outside the corral, Miggs Herrera finally broke the silence. "All right, I need to know who the hell you are." The girl stepped away from the horse and back toward the fence. Her braid, dusty from the heat, swung lightly down her back. She moved quietly, almost carefully, as if the world around her required a softer touch than most people knew how to give. When she placed her hands on the top rail, her voice came out calm but steady. "My name's Leah Carson." "Carson," Miggs repeated. "Like—" He paused, eyes narrowing. Everyone in 3 counties knew the name Carson. The Carson Ranch had been one of the oldest in the region, run by a family with deep roots and a long history, a history that had ended abruptly 2 years earlier, with a tragedy no one talked about openly. But no one had mentioned a daughter. Leah swallowed subtly, enough that someone paying close attention might have seen the tension in her throat. "Yeah," she said, "that family." Miggs took off his hat, rubbing the sweatband with his thumb. "I thought that ranch shut down." It did. "And I thought—" He caught himself before finishing the sentence. He wasn't sure what the respectful thing to say was. Everyone had heard what happened. John Carson, Leah's father, killed in a cattle truck accident on the highway. With debts rising and support falling apart, the ranch closed months later. Some said the girl moved away. Others said she stayed with relatives. Nobody really knew. Until today. Leah looked back toward the Mustang, who was now standing quietly near the center of the corral, watching her with unnerving focus. "I came because I heard you were having trouble with him," she said. Miggs blinked. "Trouble? He's put grown men in the dirt for weeks." "I know." Her voice softened. "That's why I came." One of the younger ranchers, Ben, stepped forward. "Hold on. How did you even do that? We've tried everything. He doesn't listen. He doesn't trust. He barely lets anyone get within 10 feet without going crazy." Leah didn't boast, didn't shrug. She simply said, "He's not crazy. He's scared." "Scared?" Ben scoffed. "He's a monster." She shook her head. "No. Monsters don't look for exits before they kick. He does. Monsters don't hesitate before charging. He hesitates every time." Her eyes drifted toward the Mustang again. "He's not trying to hurt anybody. He's trying to survive." The men fell quiet. Not because her explanation sounded poetic, but because it sounded true. Leah stepped down from the fence. If you let me work with him, I think I can gentle him. Not break him, gentle him. Miggs raised a brow. And what exactly do you want in return? Nothing, she said. Then she hesitated, a very small, very telling pause. Just time with him. That answer didn't make full sense to Miggs, but he wasn't about to argue with the only person the horse had responded to. All right, he said finally. You come back tomorrow at sunrise. I'll give you the pen and the horse for as long as you need. Leah nodded once, grateful but guarded. She picked up her backpack, an old canvas thing with frayed straps, and slung it over her shoulder. As she walked toward the dirt road leading out of the ranch, the men watched her in silence. Dust rose around her boots. Her braid bounced lightly at her back. And though she looked steady, almost gentle, there was something in her walk that carried weight, the weight of someone who'd lost more than she said aloud. Ben exhaled. You think she can really train that Mustang? Miggs didn't look away from her fading silhouette. I think she already started. That night, long after the ranch lights dimmed and the men retreated to their trucks and homes, Leah sat alone on the small porch of her aunt's house, staring out at the faint glow of the plains beneath the moonlight. The Mustang's eyes stayed in her mind, wild, sharp, wounded, not unlike her own reflection some days. She traced the edge of a scar on her left wrist, faint but permanent, a mark she didn't talk about, a reminder of a night she didn't let herself revisit often. You're tired, she had told the horse. She hadn't been talking only to him. A warm breeze moved through the cottonwood trees nearby, rustling softly like distant conversation. Leah closed her eyes and breathed in the familiar scent of the desert at night, dry earth, sagebrush, and the faint sweetness of evening primrose. This land was part of her. Even when everything else in her life had collapsed, the land never changed, never left, never lied. Tomorrow she would return to the Mustang, and tomorrow, she hoped, he would look at her the same way he had today, not with fear, not with aggression, but with understanding, because deep down, she knew they shared something, a history of running, of protecting themselves, of fighting battles no one else could see. What she didn't know yet, what no one knew, was that the Mustang's past held a darker truth, one that would collide with her own in ways neither of them were prepared for. And when that truth finally surfaced, the entire ranch would change forever. The first light of morning spilled across the plains, casting long, soft shadows over the ranch. The air was cool enough to hold the scent of wet earth from the night dew, but everyone knew the heat would rise fast. At this hour the land felt honest, nothing moving except distant cattle, a few circling hawks, and the quiet hum of wind weaving through the wire fences. Leah arrived before the sun fully crested the horizon. She walked with purpose, boots tapping lightly against packed dirt as she headed toward the training pen. Her braid was tighter today, her posture determined, and in her eyes there was a kind of focus that didn't belong to a girl her age, the kind of steady resolve shaped by loss and necessity. The Mustang was already awake. He stood near the far corner of the corral, head high, ears alert, steam curling from his nostrils in the cool air. He watched her approach the same way he had the day before, sharply, testing, calculating, as if deciding whether she was real or a momentary illusion. Leah stopped just outside the gate. "Good morning," she murmured, not expecting an answer but offering respect anyway. Miggs appeared a moment later, carrying a mug of coffee and looking more tired than the dawn. "Didn't think you'd actually beat me here," he said. "I couldn't sleep much." Her voice was even but not defensive. "Fair enough." Miggs took a slow sip, studying her. "Just remember, you don't owe us anything. If he gets riled up, you step back. No hero stuff." She nodded. "I know my limits." He didn't argue, though he wasn't convinced. After all, the girl had walked into the corral yesterday with more composure than half the men he'd known in 40 years of ranching. Leah unlatched the gate and stepped into the pen. The Mustang tensed but didn't bolt. His hooves shifted slightly, scraping the dirt. Not panic, just readiness. Leah kept a distance of 20 feet and stopped. She let the silence settle, let the horse see her stillness, her patience. She didn't approach. She didn't ask for anything. The message was simple: I'm here, I'm no threat. I wait. She knelt slowly, resting on one knee, making herself smaller. Horses notice things like that. Posture, height, angles. The Mustang's ears flicked forward, curious again. "Good," she whispered. "See? Nothing chasing you today." Minutes stretched, unbroken. Far off, the sounds of ranch life began stirring. Trucks starting, metal gates clanging, distant voices greeting the morning. But inside the pen the air felt sealed, as if the world outside had gone quiet out of respect for whatever was happening between the girl and the horse. Finally, Leah stood, not abruptly, not timidly, just steady. The Mustang didn't retreat. Instead, he snorted softly. Not warning, not threat, just acknowledgement. Leah took one slow step forward. The Mustang shifted his weight but didn't move away. Miggs watched from the fence, nearly holding his breath. "She's doing it again," he muttered. But this time was different. Yesterday had been instinct. Today required intention, a controlled dance between trust and uncertainty. Leah spoke softly, her voice a low rhythm. "You don't have to come to me. You just don't have to run." The Mustang's tail flicked. A small sign, but it told her he was listening. Another step, then another. She never closed the distance fully. She let him choose when to bridge the gap. And after a long moment, he did. The Mustang took 2 cautious steps toward her, lowering his head slightly, breathing in the dust around her boots. "That's it," she murmured, her hand lifted slowly, palm open, not reaching for him, just offering. The horse stretched his neck forward, sniffing her fingers, then moved past her hand and walked a small circle around her. It wasn't submission. It wasn't surrender. It was acceptance. A beginning. Leah closed her eyes briefly, steadying the emotion that rose quietly in her chest. She remembered another horse, another morning, another circle of calm around her before everything shattered, before the sirens, the phone calls, the silence afterward, before she lost the person who taught her how to read a horse's fear and how to face her own. That memory pressed on her ribs, a weight she carried without speaking. The Mustang stopped beside her, close enough that she felt the warmth of his breath on her arm. Carefully she touched his shoulder, fingers brushing his coat with the gentleness of someone handling something fragile. His skin trembled under her hand, but he didn't pull away. It was the first real contact. Not by chance, by choice. Miggs let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Damn," he whispered. "She's really doing it." Leah stroked the Mustang's shoulder, keeping her eyes low so as not to challenge him. His muscles eased beneath her fingertips. He shifted his weight closer, testing trust. "You're safe," she whispered. "You're safe right now." She didn't know if he understood the words, but he understood the tone. Soft, certain, familiar, in a way that tugged at something buried deep inside him. After several minutes, Leah stepped back, giving him space. The Mustang followed her movement with his eyes, but stayed relaxed. "That's enough for today," she said quietly, mostly to herself. "He gave me more than I expected." Miggs met her at the gate. "I've seen trainers take months to get that far," he said. "What you did in 2 days, Leah, that's not normal." She gave a faint, sad smile. "It's not talent, it's just understanding." He studied her expression, the way her eyes drifted downward, the shadow behind her calm demeanor, but didn't press. The girl had walls around her, not to keep people out, but to keep herself together. As she walked away from the pen, the Mustang trotted once along the fence line, watching her go. His ears stayed pointed toward her until she disappeared beyond the barn. Miggs scratched his jaw. "That horse sees something in you," he said. Leah paused only for a moment before continuing toward the road. "He sees something familiar," she answered softly, and she wasn't wrong. What neither of them knew was that the Mustang's past, the injuries, the fear, the relentless running, had roots deeper than any wild-born instinct. Something had happened to him long before he reached this ranch, something cruel, something that left marks no one had recognized. But Leah would, and when she did, the truth would force the ranch, and everyone on it, to face a history they didn't know they were part of. The next morning broke hotter than expected. By mid-sunrise, the air already shimmered with heat that made the horizon waver like a mirage. Wind carried the dry scent of mesquite, lifting faint dust devils across the open fields before dissolving them against the fences. Leah arrived with a small canvas bag slung over her shoulder, the same worn one she always carried, patched in 2 corners, frayed on the edges. She walked straight toward the training pen, her steps quiet, her posture composed. But today, she wasn't alone. A young man leaned against the corral fence. Tall, not much older than Leah, maybe 19 or 20. He wore a faded denim jacket, dark hair brushing his collar, and a posture that suggested too much confidence for someone who hadn't seen her work with the Mustang yet. He watched her approach with unreadable eyes. Miggs stood a few feet away from him, arms crossed, expression mildly irritated. "Morning, Leah," he said. "Didn't know you and our new hire here met already." Leah blinked, glancing between them. We haven't. The young man pushed off the fence with a small nod. Name's Caleb Rivas. Started this week. His voice carried a subtle New Mexican drawl, not thick, but noticeable. He extended a hand, but Leah didn't take it immediately. She assessed him first, not rudely, just instinctively. People, like horses, revealed themselves in their posture long before in their words. Finally, she shook his hand lightly. Leah. Caleb gave a half smile, the kind that suggested he was trying to figure her out. Heard you're the horse whisperer around here. She stiffened just slightly at the phrase. I'm not that. I'm just patient. Miggs snorted. More patient than all of us put together. Caleb rested his forearms on the fence. Mind if I watch today? Leah paused. Not because she didn't want him there, but because the Mustang didn't react well to change, and she'd learned to measure every new variable through his eyes. She glanced toward the horse. The Mustang stood farther back today, near the shadow of the barn, head lower than usual. His tail flicked once, ears swiveling, his muscles tight in a way they hadn't been the day before. He wasn't afraid. He was alert, unsettled. Stay where you are, she told Caleb calmly. Don't move around unless I say. He raised an eyebrow but nodded. Sure. Leah stepped into the pen. The Mustang lifted his head immediately, but his nostrils flared, catching a scent he didn't trust. His eyes shifted toward Caleb, who stayed still against the fence. Then back to Leah. Easy, she murmured. She moved with measured slowness, but today the horse didn't meet her halfway. Instead, he took 3 steps back, circling wide, watching her from a distance. Leah exhaled. He's nervous. Miggs frowned. He wasn't nervous yesterday. It's not me. She nodded toward Caleb. It's the smell on his jacket. Caleb looked down, sniffing his sleeve. It's just leather. No, Leah said gently. It's something else. Machinery. Maybe metal oil. Something sharp. Something he's learned to be wary of. Caleb blinked. How do you know I work nights in a mechanic shop? I didn't. She kept her eyes on the horse. He did. Caleb looked toward the Mustang with new awareness, as if seeing him differently. The horse shifted again, restless, ears flicking. Leah stepped slowly to her left, putting herself between the Mustang and the fence where Caleb stood, not to shield Caleb, but to reassure the horse. That's it, she whispered. You don't have to look at him. Just look at me. The Mustang's breathing softened. His ears angled forward again, focusing on her voice. He didn't approach yet, but he stopped retreating. Leah's movements were barely perceptible. A small pivot of her foot, a relaxed shoulder, her hands lowered, palm turned inward. She was speaking in the language the horse understood best. Silence, posture, intention. Miggs whispered to Caleb, just watch. You'll learn something worth more than a month's pay. Slowly, deliberately, Leah began creating a gentle arc with her steps, giving the Mustang space to circle if he needed. He didn't. He watched her, waiting. Finally, she stopped several feet away, the same distance as their first moment 2 days before. You're all right, she murmured. You're not trapped. The Mustang's muscles eased. He took a tentative step forward. Caleb stared, genuinely surprised. How the hell? Because she's not making him do anything, Miggs said quietly. She's asking. Leah extended her hand slowly, palm down this time, offering the back of it. Horses trusted that approach more, less intrusive, less demanding. The Mustang sniffed her knuckles, then nudged her hand with his warm breath. There you go, she said softly. Good boy. With a little more confidence, she moved her hand along his neck and shoulder. His coat shone under the growing heat, smooth but marked by faint abrasions. Small scars, healed but unmistakable, once you knew where to look. Leah's fingers paused over one of them, a thin line near his withers, another above his flank, a thicker one near the base of his neck. These weren't from wild living. These were man-made. Her eyebrows drew together. What is it? Miggs asked. He wasn't born wild, she said quietly. Someone worked him before. Caleb leaned forward slightly. Are you sure? She nodded. These scars, this pattern, they're from harness straps. Tight ones. He wasn't a wild Mustang from birth. Somebody used him. Hard. A long silence settled over the pen. Miggs looked away, jaw tight. Caleb's posture straightened, tension gathering in his shoulders. Leah kept examining the Mustang's neck, moving her fingers gently, feeling for more clues. The horse didn't pull away. He seemed almost relieved, as if having someone finally acknowledge the past written on his body brought a strange form of release. She found another scar, deeper, jagged, near the shoulder blade, This one made her stop completely. She recognized the shape. She had seen something like it before. Her stomach tightened. "This wasn't from work equipment," she said quietly. "This was from barbed wire." Mig's brows knitted together. "Accident?" "No," she answered softly. "The cut is too clean on one side, too torn on the other. This was someone trying to corner him, or trap him," Caleb muttered under his breath. "Who the hell would do that to a horse?" Leah didn't answer. She kept her hand on the Mustang's warm coat, grounding him, grounding herself, because suddenly she understood something she hadn't before. The reason the horse looked for exits, the reason he never charged first, the reason he was terrified of metal scents. He hadn't been born wild. He had escaped something. The Mustang nudged her lightly, pulling her from her thoughts. She exhaled and stroked his neck slowly. "You're all right now," she whispered. "Whatever happened, it's over." But she knew that wasn't entirely true, because scars didn't lie, and scars didn't disappear, and scars meant somebody, somewhere, had reason to hide what they'd done. When she stepped back from the Mustang, both Miggs and Caleb could see the shift in her expression. Not fear, not pity, but a quiet, simmering resolve. Something had happened to this horse, and Leah Carson intended to find out what. The wind picked up earlier than usual that day, sweeping over the plains in long, restless strokes. By mid-morning, fine dust swirled across the ranch yard, slipping beneath doorways, settling on truck dashboards, weaving into every crease of worn leather boots. It was the sort of wind old ranchers didn't ignore, the kind that suggested something was shifting in the land. Leah felt it the moment she stepped out of her aunt's truck. The Mustang stood farther away from the gate than normal, head high, muscles tight beneath his chestnut coat. His eyes tracked her immediately, alert, almost urgent, not fearful but aware, too aware, as if he knew something before she did. Miggs was already waiting near the corral. His expression was stiff, jaw clenched in a way she hadn't seen on him before. "You got in early," Leah said, brushing dust off her braid. "Couldn't sleep," he muttered. "We had a situation." Her breath paused. "With the horse?" "No," he pointed toward the dirt path behind the barn. "With whoever's been snooping around." Leah followed his gesture, squinting into the wind. At first she saw nothing unusual, just worn-down tracks from trucks, hoofprints from cattle, the scattered patterns of everyday ranch chaos. But then she saw them, fresh boot prints, deep ones, heavy ones, too clean to be old, too singular to be from ranch hands. Someone had walked the fence line in the middle of the night. Caleb approached from the opposite direction, pushing back his wind-tousled hair. His jacket was thrown over his shoulder, and he looked like he hadn't slept either. "They weren't here yesterday," he said. "I checked. These are new." Leah knelt beside the prints, brushing dust from the edges. The ground didn't lie. This man had weight to him, and purpose. His steps were straight, deliberate, not wandering like a lost visitor or someone checking equipment. Whoever it was had moved with intention, toward the training pen, right up to the gate. Her stomach tightened. Miggs lowered his voice. "They didn't break in, but they tested the latch." "Why would someone come at night?" Caleb asked. Leah stood slowly, eyes narrowing on the Mustang. The horse paced once, short and sharp, tail flicking in agitation. "He knows," she said quietly. "He felt someone here." Caleb frowned. "But why bother with a horse that's already on a ranch?" Leah didn't answer immediately. She stared at the Mustang's scars, the barbed wire cut, the harness marks, the old abrasions that told stories of panic, pressure, and escape. Escape, not capture. Escape from someone who wasn't done with him. Her pulse shifted, beating harder. Miggs gave a low sigh. "This ranch has been here for 4 decades. We've had folks try to steal cattle before. Stupid teens, drunk idiots. Idiots with more guts than brains. But a horse?" He shook his head. "Nobody tries to steal a half-trained Mustang. Too risky, too wild. Unless they want him back," Leah murmured. The words landed hard. Caleb stared at her. "Back? You mean—" "Yes." She turned, voice steadying with realization. "Those scars aren't from random accidents. They're from controlled pressure. Someone used him for work or training. Someone pushed him too hard. Someone scared him enough that he broke free and ran." Miggs rubbed a hand over his jaw. "And now they've found him again." Leah nodded once. A small, heavy motion. The wind gusted harder, kicking dust across the corral. The Mustang spooked slightly, but not from the dust, from something deeper. His eyes were locked on the fence line, his body angled toward the open land beyond. He wasn't watching the ranch. He was watching for danger. Leah stepped toward him, hands low, voice soft. "It's all right. I'm here." He took a step toward her, lowering his head, not in fear, but in trust. A trust that made the air around them feel thinner, more fragile. Miggs exhaled. "We need to figure out who those tracks belong to. I can ask around, check with neighboring ranches." "There's something else," Caleb said, glancing toward the prints. "These boots? They're not rancher boots." Miggs raised an eyebrow. "Not cowboy? Not work boots?" "No." Caleb crouched again. "Heels too sharp, narrow shape, tread patterns different. Almost like they're from someone who works with heavy equipment or industrial stuff." Leah pressed a hand against the Mustang's shoulder, grounding him as much as grounding herself. Industrial, mechanic shops, metal oils, the scent that had set the horse on edge when Caleb arrived the first day. Someone with that smell had been near him before. She met Caleb's eyes. "Like the place you work at night?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Yeah, same type of track pattern, but not my size." Miggs looked between them. "So someone with a mechanic background is snooping around my ranch for a horse with scars from equipment and wires?" The conclusion hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. "Whoever had him before," Leah said, "wasn't using him for ranch work." Caleb frowned. "Then for what?" Leah thought of the scars, the barbed wire, the harness pressure points, the way the Mustang flinched at metallic scents, the desperate intelligence in his eyes. "Probably hauling," she said quietly. "Or pulling loads he was too young or too small to handle. Maybe tied down, maybe forced into tight spaces." Miggs' expression darkened. "Damn, I've heard of those kinds of operations. Illegal hauling with underfed horses. Folks trying to save money by pushing animals past their limits. Treat them like tools instead of lives." The Mustang pawed the ground, snorting sharply. Leah glanced toward the fence line again. The boot prints cut a clean path to the pen, and then stopped. Whoever came here hadn't wandered, hadn't hesitated, hadn't explored. They had looked directly at the Mustang's gate and left, not because they changed their mind, but because they were planning something bigger. Caleb leaned on the fence. "So what do we do?" Leah tightened her grip on the canvas bag she carried. For the first time since she arrived at the ranch, her posture changed, straighter, more guarded. "We keep him close," she said. "We don't leave him alone. Not for a second." Miggs nodded. "I'll double the night checks, and I'll call the sheriff if I see the tracks again." Leah didn't smile, didn't relax, because the Mustang was pacing again, not randomly, tracing the exact spot where the boot prints had appeared at dawn. His body remembered fear long after the danger was gone. Someone had come looking for him, someone who wanted him back. And if they were bold enough to come once, they would come again. The wind settled by late afternoon, leaving behind a heavy stillness that clung to the ranch like a warning. The sun hovered low, spreading long orange beams across the corrals and painting the barn walls in quiet gold. Even the cattle farther out seemed subdued, moving slower, their silhouettes steady against the fading light. Leah stood beside the Mustang's pen, watching him walk the perimeter with a rigid rhythm. His ears flicked at every small noise. A truck door closing, a hinge creaking, the flap of a tarp in the wind. He wasn't panicking, but he wasn't calm either. He was remembering. "Something scared him last night," Leah murmured. Miggs stepped up beside her, wiping sweat from his neck. "I don't like this. Whoever was here might come back as soon as we drop our guard." "They will," she said simply. "This isn't over yet." The Mustang snorted and finally came to rest near the fence. Leah brushed her fingers against the wire, wishing she could promise him safety the way she used to promise it to her old horse. But promises didn't stop danger. Caleb arrived a few minutes later, carrying a bucket with hay pellets. He glanced at the Mustang, then at Leah. "He's been on edge all day." "He feels things we don't," Leah replied, "especially when something's wrong." Caleb leaned on the top rail. "I just don't get why someone would come back for him. If they were treating him like that, wouldn't they let him go?" Leah shook her head. "Not if he's worth money. Some people don't see horses as animals. They see them as assets." Caleb swallowed hard, jaw tightening. "Whoever they are, I want to help. I don't like the idea of someone creeping around here at night." Miggs sighed. "You help by keeping your eyes open. That's all." But the truth was hanging between them. They were no longer dealing with just training a sensitive Mustang. They were dealing with someone who might return angry, desperate or cornered, someone who believed the horse belonged to him. Leah climbed into the pen and approached the Mustang with slow, measured steps. He recognized her scent and softened, lowering his head into her open palm. "She's here, I'm safe." His body language said it all. "Good boy," she whispered, stroking his neck. She walked around him, checking his coat, his legs, his breathing. Everything seemed normal, except for the tension that hadn't left his muscles since dawn. Then she saw it, a small patch of dried mud on his left shoulder, but not just mud. She touched it lightly, frowning. It was darker, with a faint metallic smell, something artificial, the kind of residue you found in workshops, on trailers, on chains. Her breath hitched. "Miggs!" she called. "Come look at this." He ducked into the pen, squatting beside her. Caleb followed. She angled the Mustang's shoulder toward the light. "This wasn't here yesterday." Miggs leaned closer, sniffing the patch. His face hardened. "Engine grease. That's not ranch dirt." Caleb's eyes widened. "Are you saying someone touched him?" Leah nodded, her voice tight. "Yes, someone got close enough to put their hands on him." The Mustang shifted, uneasy with the attention, so Leah stepped in front of him, rubbing his forehead and calming him. "It's okay. We're not mad at you." Miggs stood abruptly. "How the hell did we miss that last night? I checked the fence myself." "It happened fast," Leah said. "Or when he was cornered. He might have been too scared to move, too scared to make noise." Caleb clenched his fists. "They're scouting him, testing the ranch's reactions." Leah nodded. "It wasn't a random visit. It was preparation. Someone wants him back," she said. "Badly." Miggs exhaled sharply. "Then tonight we keep a watch. No exceptions. I'll stay up. Caleb, you too." Caleb nodded. "I'm in." "And you?" Miggs asked, turning to Leah. She hesitated, not because she was afraid, but because she felt something in her chest tighten. A memory, a reflection, a smell. A night 2 years ago when she heard a noise outside her father's ranch, and he told her to stay inside, and she never saw him alive again. "I'm staying," she said finally. "I'm not leaving him." Miggs studied her for a long moment, reading the unspoken weight behind her voice. He didn't argue. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky with streaks of dusky pink. The ranch fell quiet around them, preparing for the long night ahead. By dusk, they had taken positions. Miggs in the barn doorway, shotgun propped, but not loaded. A warning tool, not a weapon. Caleb near the fence line, flashlight clipped to his belt, scanning the fields. Leah sitting inside the corral itself, back resting against the wooden post, the Mustang lying near her in the dust, still alert but anchored by her presence. She stroked his neck in slow circles, feeling the rise and fall of his breath against the quiet. "You're all right," she whispered. "I'm here. I won't let anyone take you." His ears flicked toward her voice, then toward the fields. Hours passed. The sky turned black. Stars spread like small, bright promises overhead. Around midnight, Caleb walked to her quietly. "You should sleep. We can take shifts." Leah shook her head. "Not tonight." He hesitated, then crouched beside the fence. "You really care about him." She traced the Mustang's mane between her fingers. "I know what it feels like to run from something you shouldn't have had to face." Caleb didn't push for details. He just nodded. "He trusts you more than anyone." Leah exhaled slowly. "Trust is a fragile thing, and someone already broke his once." Caleb glanced toward the dark open land. "If they come back, we'll stop them." But Leah wasn't sure stopping would be simple, because whoever had touched this horse last had left more than grease on his coat. They had left a message, a silent claim, a warning, something Leah knew too well from her own past. People who lose control don't just give up. They come back for what they think is theirs. And tonight, she had a feeling the shadows would not stay empty for long. The ranch had a different sound at night, not silence but a layered hush. Crickets murmured in the dry grass, cattle shifted far out in the fields, and the wooden beams of the barn creaked softly as they cooled under the desert sky. The wind had calmed, leaving the world unnervingly still, as though the land itself was holding its breath. Leah sat cross-legged in the corral's dust, jacket wrapped around her shoulders against the cold. The Mustang lay nearby, not asleep, but resting with his legs tucked under him, eyes half closed yet constantly scanning the dark. Every few minutes he would raise his head, ears tilting sharply toward something only he could sense. Caleb patrolled the fence line with a slow, steady rhythm. Miggs leaned against the barn doorway, arms crossed, watching the horizon. Nothing moved. Nothing happened. And yet, everything felt wrong. Leah glanced at the sky. Midnight had slipped into early morning. Stars stretched across the heavens in a cold, glittering blanket, but their brightness did little to ease the tension in her chest. "You feel it too," she whispered to the Mustang. He lifted his head, nostrils flaring. A soft huff escaped him. Not fear, recognition. Leah's pulse rose. She stood slowly, brushing dust from her jeans, and walked toward the center of the pen to get a better view of the open land. Caleb noticed her movement and jogged over, climbing the lowest fence rail. "See something?" he asked. "No," she said, "but he does." Caleb scanned the fields. "It's dead quiet." "Exactly." Miggs started walking toward them, gravel crunching under his boots. "Let's rotate shifts. I'll take the next 2 hours. You two rest." The Mustang jerked his head up, hard, so fast his mane whipped sideways. Leah turned sharply. "Something's here." Caleb froze. "Where?" The Mustang's entire body oriented toward the northern fence, the only part of the property that opened directly into miles of isolated desert. No houses, no roads, no lights, just open land. Miggs tracked the horse's gaze. "Everyone stay where you are," he whispered, already reaching for the flashlight clipped to his belt. But before he could turn it on, Leah grabbed his wrist. "No light." Miggs frowned. "What? Why?" "Because whoever's out there came prepared," she said. "The moment we shine a light, they'll know exactly where we are." Caleb swallowed. "So we stand here blind?" "They're not going to walk straight toward us," she said. "Not if they're scouting. They'll circle first. Look for gaps, weak points." Miggs whispered. "Then we wait." The Mustang took 2 steps back, muscles coiling, gaze locked on the darkness beyond the fence. His breathing deepened, a warning, a whisper of instinct older than any human fear. Leah climbed onto the second fence rail, gripping the wood tightly. Her eyes strained against the black horizon. For a long moment, she saw nothing. Then the wind shifted, and with it, a small sound, soft, metallic, familiar, a faint click like a trailer latch, or the hinge of a truck door opening slowly, the kind of sound that didn't belong on an isolated ranch at 2 in the morning. Caleb exhaled through clenched teeth. "Tell me you heard that." Miggs nodded once. "North side." "Near the arroyo." The Mustang pawed the dirt anxiously. Leah's voice dropped low. "They're here." For the next 30 seconds, the world felt stretched thin, as though the night were pulling everything taut. Then, a flash. Not bright enough to be a flashlight, not long enough to be deliberate. It looked more like the reflection of moonlight off metal. A truck bumper. Leah's stomach twisted. "They're using the arroyo as cover. They're trying to get close without being seen." Caleb's jaw tightened. "We need to do something." "No one goes out there," Miggs said firmly. "Not in the dark. That's how people get hurt. But we can't let them get to the horse," Caleb argued. "They're not getting past the fence without noise," Miggs countered. "The wire'll wake the whole ranch." Leah shook her head slowly. "Not if they know the weak points." She glanced toward the far right corner of the north fence, the panel with the older posts, the one Miggs had been planning to reinforce next month. A chill slid down her spine. "That corner," she murmured. "They'll try that corner." Caleb's eyes widened. "Because it bends." "And because the Mustang reacts to that side," Leah added. "He's been staring at it all day." Miggs cursed under his breath. "Let's move." They split instinctively. Miggs circled wide toward the barn for a better vantage point. Caleb moved halfway along the fence, crouching low. Leah stayed inside the pen, close to the horse, close to the danger. The Mustang pressed his body near her, angling himself between her and the fence. A protective gesture, subtle but deliberate. She rested her palm on his shoulder. "Easy. I've got you." Another faint sound drifted in. Not metal this time. Something softer. Footsteps on sand. Slow. Measured. Deliberate. Caleb whispered harshly. "They're walking the arroyo edge." Miggs raised a hand. "Don't move." The Mustang's breath quickened. Then, a voice. Low. Male. Close enough that the words floated on the breeze. "There you are." Leah went cold. Caleb stiffened. Miggs reached instinctively for his shotgun, but it was Leah who reacted first. She stepped in front of the Mustang, not because she could see the man, not because she knew what he wanted, but because the horse took a step back, the exact step horses take when they recognize a voice they never wanted to hear again. The voice drifted closer, slow, unhurried. "You thought you could run forever?" Leah's breath hitched. Caleb hissed, "Leah, get back." But she didn't move. She stared into the dark, heart pounding, feeling the Mustang trembling behind her, not from fear of the man's presence, from the memory of it. The man stepped just close enough for his shadow to break the moonlight. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy mechanic's jacket, and on his boots, the same tread pattern they'd seen in the dirt that morning. He took one more step forward, "That horse," he said, voice deepening, "belongs to me." Leah lifted her chin, and for the first time since arriving at the ranch, her voice held fire. "No," she said, "he doesn't." The Mustang pressed closer to her back. The man smiled, slow, confident, dangerous. "We'll see." The man didn't rush. That was the first thing Leah noticed. He stood just outside the northern fence, one boot planted in a patch of moonlit dirt, the other half buried in shadow. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, the posture of someone who believed he was in control long before anyone else realized a fight was coming. Caleb shifted his weight slowly, trying to close the distance along the fence without drawing attention. Miggs moved the opposite direction, stepping into a better angle near the barn, keeping the man in sight. No one wanted this to turn into a confrontation, but none of them were willing to let the stranger take a single step closer. Leah's breath steadied. She didn't back away from the fence, didn't move behind the Mustang. She stayed exactly where she was. The Mustang pressed his side against her hip, trembling but holding his ground. His ears were pinned back, not in anger, but in dread. The kind of dread that came from memory, not confusion. The man clicked his tongue once. "See, he recognizes me." Leah felt the horse flinch, and every muscle in her body tightened. "He recognizes a threat." The man smirked, adjusting his jacket collar. "Funny, that's not what he used to think." Caleb called out, voice sharp. "You got no business here. Trespassing on private land. That's a crime in this county if you didn't know." "I'm not trespassing," the man replied calmly. "I'm retrieving stolen property." Miggs stepped forward, shotgun tucked under one arm but pointed at the ground, a warning without escalation. "We didn't steal anything," he said. "That horse showed up on his own weeks ago, half-starved, half-wild, and sure as hell half-broken." The man shrugged. "He likes to run, always has, but he's mine, marked and trained." "Marked?" Leah repeated, narrowing her eyes. "What do you mean, marked?" The man reached into his pocket. Caleb tensed. Miggs brought the shotgun an inch higher. The man held up both hands. "Relax, it's just a tag." He pulled out a small metal plate, bent, dirty, scraped on one side. It had a number scratched into it, not engraved. A crude method, sloppy, but real. Leah's stomach twisted. She had seen plates like that before, on illegal equipment, on horses used in underground hauling operations where nothing was regulated and everything was disposable. The man tossed the plate toward the fence. It clattered in the dirt near Leah's boots. "That belongs to him," the man said. "Came off during, let's call it an accident." Leah stared at the plate. Cold metal, sharp corners, a number instead of a name. The Mustang jerked back hard at the sound of the impact, snorting sharply and backing behind her. His fear spiked so suddenly that he nearly knocked Leah off balance. She steadied him quickly, one hand on his shoulder. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm not letting anyone hurt you." The man watched her quietly, narrowing his eyes. "You're good with him," he said. "Better than most." His tone shifted, smoother. "You bring him out of there, we can make a deal." Miggs barked a humorless laugh. "You think we're negotiating? You step foot on my property again?" "Save it," the man snapped, his voice tightening. "None of you understand the kind of animal you're protecting." "Oh, we understand plenty," Leah said. She stepped closer to the fence. Caleb hissed her name under his breath, trying to stop her, but she didn't break eye contact with the man. "You ran him into wire," she said. "You strapped him too tight, used him before he was ready, and when he panicked, you didn't fix it. You punished him." The man's jaw flexed. She took another step forward. "And you didn't expect him to survive out here, but he did, and he won't go back with you." The Mustang pressed his head into her shoulder, a gesture so desperate and raw that the man's expression flickered for the first time. Not with guilt, with irritation. "He's valuable," the man said flatly, "and he's mine." "No," Leah said. "He's not." The silence that followed was razor thin. The wind moved again for the first time in hours, kicking dust across the fence line. The man looked down the length of the wire, studying every corner, every weak post, every angle of access. "We'll talk again tomorrow," he said. Miggs took a step forward. "You're not welcome here." The man smiled, small and cold. "I'm not asking for permission." He turned and walked along the fence, boots crunching in slow, deliberate steps. His silhouette faded into the darkness, swallowed by the arroyo and the desert beyond. Caleb moved quickly to follow his path, staying inside the fence for safety. Miggs didn't move until the man's footsteps disappeared completely. Only then did Leah allow herself to exhale. The Mustang stood frozen, muscles trembling beneath his coat. Leah wrapped her arms around his neck gently, grounding him, feeling his heart hammering against her palms. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm here. You're safe." But even as she said the words, she knew safety was temporary. The kind of man who walked into a ranch in the middle of the night didn't give up. The kind of man who marked a horse with a number didn't negotiate. And the kind of man who saw a teenage girl standing between him and what he believed he owned was a danger the ranch had never faced before. Miggs walked up beside her, voice low. "This ain't just about a horse anymore, is it?" Leah shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "It's not." She looked toward the darkness where the man had vanished. He'll come back. And next time, he wouldn't come alone. Morning broke hard and sharp after a sleepless night. The sky was washed in pale grey instead of gold, and the air held a heaviness that everyone on the ranch felt immediately. Even the cattle were restless, moving in tight clusters instead of spreading across the pasture like usual. Leah arrived before sunrise, shoulders tense, eyes scanning the northern fence before she even reached the corral. The Mustang lifted his head the moment he saw her. His coat was slicked with a thin layer of dust, and his nostrils flared at every sound. He hadn't slept, not really. Neither had she. Caleb walked toward her with 2 styrofoam cups of gas station coffee. He looked exhausted. "Here," he said, offering her one. "It's terrible, but it's coffee." "Thanks," she said quietly, wrapping her hands around the cup. Miggs came out from the barn, face still shadowed by the night before. "Sheriff won't send a unit unless he trespasses again," he said. "Can't do much about someone walking near our fence line," Caleb scoffed. "So he basically gets a free pass to scare the hell out of us." Miggs shrugged, frustration tight in his movements. "That's the law." Leah didn't say anything. Her focus stayed on the Mustang, who had begun pacing the far side of the pen again, the same nervous loop he made when he sensed danger nearby. "We can't wait for him to come back," she said finally. "Not without a plan." Miggs raised a brow. "Plan? You got one?" "Yes," she said, turning fully to face him. "But it won't work unless all of us agree." Caleb sat his coffee on a fence post. "Go on." Leah looked at the Mustang again, the way he scanned the horizon, the scars that lived under his coat, like old wounds waiting to be torn open again, the confusion in his eyes each time he caught a scent that reminded him of metal, of engines, of fear. "He won't survive if that man takes him back," she said. "You know that." Miggs nodded slowly. Caleb nodded faster. "So," Leah continued, "we don't let him get near the horse, not through the fence, not through the pen, not through the barn, nowhere." Caleb responded, voice steady. "Then what do we do?" Leah's jaw tightened. "We move him." Silence dropped heavy around them. Miggs blinked. "Move him? Move him where?" "Away from here," she said. "Someplace he can't track easily. Someplace we can watch him without giving away our position." Caleb frowned. "But this ranch is huge. He could hide anywhere." Leah shook her head. "Not hide. Relocate. Temporarily. Just until we know what this man wants or until we tell the sheriff what's happening and they actually take it seriously." Miggs sighed. "You're talking like he's coming tonight." She met his eyes without blinking. "He is." Miggs opened his mouth to respond, but stopped, because the Mustang suddenly froze. Every muscle snapped rigid. His ears locked forward. His chest expanded with a sharp inhale. Then he bolted to the opposite side of the pen, nearly slamming into the fence. Leah spun. "Something's wrong." Caleb ran up the nearest fence rail. "Where? What does he see?" Not the north fence, not the arroyo. The road. A dust cloud. Low, thick, moving fast. Miggs cursed. "Damn it. Already." Leah grabbed the rail. "How many trucks?" Caleb squinted. "1. No, 2. The Mustang paced hard, panicking, his hooves digging trenches into the dirt. He wasn't just afraid. He was remembering. The dust cloud grew. 2 trucks. Dark-colored. No logos. Moving too fast for a casual visit. Too slow for an emergency. Straight toward the ranch entrance. "Miggs," Leah said. "Get the gates blocked." He didn't question her. He ran. Caleb turned to Leah, anxiety tightening his face. "What if it's not him?" "It's him," she said. "He said tomorrow. And the kind of man who brands a horse with a number doesn't break promises." The trucks slowed as they approached the ranch's main gate, engines grumbling like predators waiting to strike. One stopped beside the metal entrance, the other hung back 8 or 9 meters, positioned like backup. A man climbed out of the first truck, the same man from last night, but today he wasn't alone. 2 more stepped out of the second truck, broader, younger, rougher. One carried a coiled rope, The other wore gloves and a belt with cutters hanging from it. Caleb whispered, "They came ready." Leah replied, "They came expecting a fight." The man at the front dusted off his jacket and walked toward the fence with the confidence of someone who believed the land already belonged to him. Miggs intercepted him halfway. "You need to leave," Miggs said, planting himself firmly between the stranger and the corral. "Now." The man didn't stop walking. "I told you last night we'd talk again." "This ain't talk," Miggs said. "You brought muscle, tools." "That's not talk. That's taking." The man's smile was slow and cold. "Move aside." Miggs didn't. Leah climbed halfway up the fence, placing herself directly above the Mustang so he wouldn't panic and run himself into injury again. "Don't come any closer," she said. He finally looked up at her. "Girl," he said, "that's my horse." "No," she answered. "You just used him." The man tilted his head. "You think you understand horses. You think you know where he came from. You don't know a damn thing." "I know enough," she said, voice steady. "I know what fear looks like." The man's smile dropped. His eyes darkened. "Get down from that fence," he ordered. Leah didn't move. The Mustang pressed his body against the rails beneath her, shaking. Caleb stepped up beside her on the same fence rail, jaw clenched. "You're not taking him." The other two men started moving, widening their angle, drifting toward the weak corner of the fence on the right side, the one Leah had identified the night before. The stranger's voice hardened. "One way or another, that horse leaves with us." Miggs raised his shotgun, not aiming but holding it where everyone could see it. "You're not taking him." For the first time, the man's posture changed, shoulders tensed, chin lifted, stance shifting with irritation and calculation. He realized the ranch wouldn't back down, but neither would he. He turned toward his men. "Cut the fence!" Leah's heart slammed against her ribs. "No!" she shouted, climbing down into the pen. The Mustang panicked, circling her so fast she had to move with him to keep from getting knocked over. His breathing hit a wild rhythm, hooves scattering dirt like a spray. Caleb jumped into the pen after her. "Get behind me," he yelled. She didn't. The two men reached the weak corner. One pulled bolt cutters from his belt. The other grabbed the top rail, testing its strength. The Mustang reared, not at them, but at the memory of them. And then something in Leah snapped into place. A decision, a line drawn in dust. She grabbed the Mustang's halter rope, never used until now, and whispered sharply into his ear, "We run." Caleb spun toward her. "Leah, what are you doing?" But she didn't answer, because the bolt cutters clamped down on the first wire, and the Mustang, hearing that sound, the sound that had scarred half his body, lunged forward toward the only person he trusted, and Leah ran with him, straight toward the open land beyond the eastern ridge, straight away from the ranch, straight into whatever came next. Leah didn't look back. The second the fence cutter snapped through the first wire, she felt the Mustang's body explode forward beside her, not in wild panic, but in a desperate, instinctive surge for survival. His hooves hammered the earth, flinging dust into the air. She clutched the rope, not to control him, but to stay with him, to anchor herself to his momentum. Caleb shouted her name behind her. Miggs yelled something too, orders, warnings, curses, but the wind swallowed their voices the moment she cleared the outer fence line. The ranch, the shouting, the threatening men, it all fell away. There was only the Mustang, only the open land, only the run. The eastern ridge sloped downward into a stretch of low desert brush, sparse creosote shrubs, brittle patches of buffalo grass, and long stretches of sand that shimmered faintly in the morning light. The horizon was an unbroken line, a flat plain of freedom and uncertainty. The Mustang moved like something both powerful and wounded, a creature who had learned fear early and never forgotten it. Every stride carried a lifetime of running. Every breath was thick with survival. Leah kept pace as best she could, boots slipping on gravel, heart pounding, lungs burning. She didn't try to slow him. She didn't call his name. She didn't pull the rope. She just ran. He needed this. And she needed to be with him. Behind them, voices erupted. The men at the fence shouting, scrambling, arguing. Engines revved. Doors slammed. The grind of tires on gravel warned her that the trucks were moving again. Caleb's voice rose above the chaos, distant but fierce. "LIA, go east, stay out of the road!" She didn't respond. She only tightened her grip. The Mustang veered toward a dry wash, a natural ditch carved by seasonal floods. Leah followed him down the slope, sliding on loose sand, nearly losing her footing. The rope bit into her palm, skin burning. He slowed only when he hit the wash bed. his hooves sinking slightly in the softer ground. Leah stumbled, caught herself on his shoulder, and pressed her forehead briefly against him. "It's okay," she panted. "I'm here. Just breathe." The Mustang snorted hard, ears flicking back and forth, eyes wide. His whole body shook with the adrenaline of running from something he believed could destroy him. He wasn't just afraid of the men. He was afraid of going back to a life where pain was the only language he knew. Leah scratched along his neck, grounding him. "You're not going with them." She meant it, with every ounce of her being. They stood there for a few seconds, just long enough for Leah to feel the trembling in his legs, for the desert to settle around them, for her lungs to catch enough breath to think. Then she heard the engines again. The trucks crept along the ridge above them, moving slowly, searching. The men didn't know yet which direction she and the Mustang had taken, but they were looking, and once they found tracks, they'd follow. "We can't stay here," she whispered. The Mustang lifted his head, ears locking on a sound from the distance. Perhaps the trucks, perhaps the wind, perhaps the memory of danger. But he understood. This wasn't over. Leah tugged the rope gently and began leading him through the wash, using the sandy ground to hide their tracks as best as possible. The sun was rising faster now, filling the desert with harsh light, heat reflected off the sand in shimmering waves. She knew this part of New Mexico well, the old paths she rode when she was younger, the back routes her father taught her before the accident, the narrow passes between sandstone ridges that offered cover when storms rolled in. She knew where to go, if she could make it. They followed the wash for nearly a mile before reaching a shallow bend where a large cottonwood tree grew stubbornly against the arid land. Its roots dug deep into the underground moisture, offering the only patch of shade for kilometers. Leah led the Mustang beneath it, both of them gasping for air. Her legs trembled, her hands shook, her throat burned, but she didn't stop listening. The wind, the brush, the distant hum of engines. She crouched beside the horse, resting her forehead against the rope burns on her hands. "What do they want with you?" she whispered. The Mustang nudged her shoulder softly, almost apologetically, as if he felt guilty for dragging her into danger. She ran her fingers over his cheek. "Don't be sorry. None of this is your fault." Footsteps crunched behind her. Leah jerked around, heart slamming against her ribs. But it wasn't one of the men, it was Caleb. He appeared over the edge of the wash, covered in dust, breathing heavily. "Thank God," he exhaled, sliding down the slope. "I followed your tracks until they disappeared. Took a chance you'd head east." Leah pushed tears from her eyes with dusty fingers. "Caleb, they were going to take him." "I know," Caleb said, "and they're still trying." He reached the bottom of the wash and stood beside her, scanning the horizon. Miggs called the sheriff again, gave names, descriptions, told them about the cutters. "They're sending someone, but it'll take time." The Mustang nudged Caleb's arm this time. Not trust exactly, but recognition. Caleb steadied him gently. "They won't stop," Caleb said quietly. "You know that, right?" Leah nodded. "That's why we ran." He looked at her, really looked, and saw the fear she'd been carrying behind her calm voice. "You did the right thing," he said. "No." Her voice cracked. "I did the only thing." Caleb exhaled through his teeth. "We need to get you two farther out. If they follow the wash, they'll find us." "I know a place," Leah said. "Old ranch, shed my father built years ago. Hard to spot. Off the main paths." Caleb nodded. "Lead the way." They started moving northeast, following the wash until it forked into a narrow canyon. The walls rose higher, offering shade and protection. Leah's legs ached, her breaths uneven, but the Mustang stayed close, matching her pace, no longer pulling or panicking. He wasn't running from danger anymore. He was following her into safety. Minutes stretched into nearly an hour before they reached the hidden shed, a small weathered building tucked between two sandstone boulders. It looked like nothing from the outside, a forgotten structure, a shadow of an old life, but it was shelter, and it was theirs. Caleb pushed open the warped wooden door. "We can stay here until the sheriff gets to the ranch." Leah led the Mustang inside. The space was tight but safe, just enough room for him to stand, enough darkness for him to feel hidden, enough familiarity for her to breathe for the first time since the run began. She pressed her forehead to his neck. "You're safe," she whispered. The Mustang lowered his head gently against her shoulder, the closest thing to a thank you she'd ever felt from him. Outside, the desert was quiet, but the danger wasn't gone. Caleb closed the shed door softly. "They're not going to like losing him." Leah swallowed hard. "Let them come." She placed her hand on the Mustang's shoulder, feeling his heartbeat beneath her palm. "They're going to learn he's not alone anymore."